Thank you, Madam President. I rise to explain my vote.
Please do.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to remark on why we are here today, voting on this measure. The first piece of this narrative was that this is what the voters asked for. As you may recall, this is not our idea to be voting on this. The expenditure limit is in the Arizona Constitution, and it was put there by the voters of Arizona. That limit set in place what would be under the expenditure limit as well as how it could grow in the years after. It's allowed to grow by population growth, obviously, and as inflation changes the value of the dollar, which lately has been quite high. And so that number can continue to go up. And over the years, there have been more and more items that have been excluded from the limit, giving it more room to account for more education funding, essentially. One of those items was Prop 301 when it was passed in the late 90s. Fast forward to today. Prop 301 ran its course, and we decided, the legislature, we wanted to continue it. The vast majority of us a few years ago voted to continue Prop 301. However, because it was not continued as in the original sort of way, it's under the limit now. So that's part of the reason we've hit the limit, is the 301 issue, about maybe half of the resources. But the other half is because the magnitude of dollars that have been invested over the last several years, not just the 20% pay raise, restoration of all sorts of funds that are part of the K-12 finance formula. We knew this day was coming. We kept talking about it, how we were making unprecedented, historic investments in K-12. What some would say was a drop in the bucket, but what apparently the voters would say is at or now exceeding the constitutional limit that they set. I think that's remarkable. And that's something we should all take notice of. And I find it interesting that people are kind of dismissing what the voters passed before in the state constitution. So we're here today, just to make it very clear, because of the billions of dollars that we've invested in our K-12 system that are now exceeding the limit by however many figures it is, $1 billion plus, to what the voters set in motion. And they provide us a way to do that on a year-by-year basis, and that is this vote. A 2/3 override. They want it to be a supermajority because of how important it is if you're going to override the limit set by the voters before. Now, my own feelings on this have been conflicted. Most people know this. Not because I disagree with overriding the limit. I don't. I support overriding the limit. For me, it's been one of timing. It's been a matter of timing. The issue outstanding out there is a lawsuit that also involves the expenditure limit in a different context, but nevertheless, it's the expenditure limit at stake, and that's the Prop 208 lawsuit. As you may recall, the state Supreme Court has largely basically declared it unconstitutional. They said that when it was referred to the voters before, it needed to be done in a way that acknowledged the aggregate expenditure limit. That was not done. So the voters didn't have all the information, and what was passed there violated the state constitution. It violated what the voters had done before. And some would say one of the reasons they didn't put that in there is because it may not have passed at the bat. Barely passed as it was, 51% of the vote. And if you had actually put that in there, it may not have passed. And so they said, we think this is unconstitutional. If it violates the expenditure limit, it is unconstitutional. We need the lower court to go and crunch the numbers. A simple math calculation at this point, and that was done months and months ago. Yeah, the court was, the case was argued in April. The court ruled a few months later. They took actually a little bit longer than some of us were hoping them to take, but they nevertheless ruled after we ended session last year. And it's been in the hands of a judge ever since then. And many of us thought, okay, this will be wrapped up well before session, because it's just, I know math is not everybody's strong suit, but it's just crunching the numbers. What is the math work out to be? But here we sit in February, approaching March, and we still don't have the result of that case. And when asked, hey, Judge, can you give us at least some idea with respect of when that opinion that we thought would be here by now is going to be forthcoming. He didn't feel it was, he didn't need to do that. So it's a very frustrating situation. In fact, I've said before, I've moved from frustrating to furious at the whole situation because this was entirely avoidable, a lot of the hesitation that many of us had. If this had been resolved, if the case was over, we would have voted on this quite some time ago. I think the vast majority of us here would acknowledge that. And so here we sit again because of a timing issue. So that brings me to my vote now. What do I do? Because I have been insistent that I want to see what happens with the Prop 208 lawsuit. It shouldn't have any bearing on the lawsuit, okay? But given the amount of time it's taken, it makes me wonder, what is the agenda? What is the plan? It seems, it's a head scratcher that it's taken this long. Well, as my opinion about my vote, anyway, got out there, some on the other side of the lawsuit for my position actually reached out to me, and we had a pleasant conversation. We don't agree on the Prop 208 situation. We had a pleasant conversation about the lawsuit and about this vote and any implication this vote has on the lawsuit. And the folks opposite me of the 208 lawsuit specifically stipulated this has no bearing on the lawsuit. Okay? That was a recent conversation I just had. It has no bearing. They've stipulated that in writing. All right? So because of that, I'm going to vote yes. Okay? I am still a little bit nervous because the judge can do what he's going to do, and I know that we have in the meantime applied to the state Supreme Court to intervene in an emergency request. That happened on Friday. I was sort of hoping there'd be an answer even as soon as today. Everyone knows this is a pressing issue. We're approaching a year from when the case was argued, and everyone knew that timing was of the essence. But as, Madam President, you said earlier, I don't want there to be any consequence to our students here. So this vote is about this year only, the next 3 or 4 months remaining. We obviously have the more permanent issue of what we do because we're going to be back here every single year with that limit growing every year because of the sheer magnitude of additional resources that we're putting into K-12. I look forward to that conversation. I think it's going to be broader than the limit. We're going to be talking about the whole system, as my friend Senator Leach was mentioning earlier. But for purposes of the remainder of this year, in light of what I've learned about the lawsuit from folks opposite me of the lawsuit, who I appreciate reaching out to me, knowing our differences, but want to acknowledge that this won't impact that lawsuit. I'm sure they'll be pointing to the vote for purposes of the fact that there's an expenditure limit, but it doesn't impact the lawsuit. The court has said that, they have stipulated that, and it is specifically, Madam President, for that reason that I vote aye.
Thank you, Senator Mesnard.